they're pretending they don't care. But they haven't stopped watching you for a single day. Every post, every move, every glow-up, they see it all in silence. The real question isn't whether they miss you. It's why they're too afraid to reach out. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what their silence truly means. They're watching you, and they are far more affected than they will ever admit, because when someone keeps checking your profile, revisiting your old messages in their mind, asking mutual friends about you without making it obvious, and silently observing your growth from a distance, it is never random curiosity, it is emotional attachment mixed with fear, pride, guilt, and uncertainty. And the truth is that when a person is afraid to reach out yet still watches you, it means your presence still holds power in their heart, because indifference does not monitor, indifference does not care, indifference does not hesitate, but fear does, ego does, unresolved feelings do, and right now they are stuck in that uncomfortable space where their heart wants to reconnect but their mind is reminding them of everything that could go wrong, every word that was left unsaid, every misunderstanding that still lingers like unfinished business, and every possibility that you may have moved on and no longer feel the same way, and that fear is heavier than their desire to text you first, because reaching out would require vulnerability, and vulnerability feels dangerous when someone is unsure of the response they might receive, so instead they watch, they scroll, they analyze your posts, they read between the lines of your captions, they wonder who you are spending time with, they overthink every picture you upload, and they try to decode whether your smile is genuine happiness or a quiet message meant for them, because when someone cannot let go but also cannot step forward, observation becomes their comfort zone, and what you need to understand is that this silent watching is not weakness on your part, it is confusion on theirs, because if they truly did not care, they would not be paying attention, if they were completely done, they would not feel that slight sting every time they see you doing well. And if they were fully confident in their decision to stay away, they would not feel that constant pull urging them to check on you again and again, but pride can be stubborn, and sometimes people would rather suffer in silence than risk rejection, especially if the last interaction ended with tension, hurt, or misunderstanding, because now their mind is replaying old scenarios, wondering if they misjudged you, if they reacted too quickly, if they let ego speak louder than love. And while they are thinking all of this, you are simply living your life, glowing differently, carrying a new energy that comes from focusing on yourself instead of chasing someone who wasn't ready, and that new energy is intimidating to them, because growth changes dynamics, and when they see you becoming stronger, calmer, less reactive, more self-assured, it forces them to confront the possibility that they underestimated you, that they thought you would always be available, always reachable, always waiting. But now there is distance, and distance creates doubt, and doubt creates fear, and fear keeps their fingers hovering over your name without pressing send, and maybe they type messages and delete them, maybe they open your chat and close it, maybe they imagine what they would say if they ever gathered the courage, but imagination feels safer than reality, because reality can reject, reality can ignore, reality can expose the truth that they are not as important in your world as they once were. And that possibility shakes them, because deep down they still want to matter, they still want access, they still want to know that if they knocked on the door of your heart, it would not be permanently locked, yet at the same time they are afraid that too much time has passed, that silence has built walls thicker than before, that you have learned lessons that changed how you see them, and they sense that something about you is different now. You are not chasing, not over-explaining, not proving, and that quiet confidence unsettles them. Because the version of you they were used to was emotionally open and reactive, but this version is composed, and composure can feel like detachment to someone who is insecure, so instead of risking a direct conversation, they settle for indirect presence. They show up in subtle ways, maybe watching your stories immediately, maybe liking something unexpectedly, maybe asking a mutual friend about you casually as if it is no big deal. But all of these small behaviors reveal one thing clearly: they are still emotionally connected. They just do not know how to bridge the gap without losing control of the situation, because reaching out would mean admitting they miss you, admitting they care, admitting that walking away did not bring the peace they expected, and that level of honesty requires courage that they have not yet developed, so they stay silent, hoping that somehow you will break the silence first, hoping you will give them a signal, hoping you will make it easier for them to return without having to fully own their feelings. And this is where your power lies, because the moment you stopped chasing, the moment you stopped forcing conversations, the moment you decided your peace was more important than proving your worth, the dynamic shifted, and now they feel the absence. They feel the space you once filled, and absence can be louder than presence, because when someone is always there, they become familiar, but when they step back, they become noticeable, and you have become noticeable again in a way that is impossible to ignore. And the more you focus on your own growth, your own happiness, your own alignment, the stronger that silent pull becomes for them, because energy speaks even when words do not, and your calm, your independence, your refusal to beg for attention is creating a quiet storm inside them, making them question their pride, their hesitation, their fear of rejection. And sometimes people need to sit in that discomfort long enough to realize that fear has cost them more than vulnerability ever could. But until that realization fully settles in their heart, they will remain watchers instead of communicators, observers instead of participants, and you must not mistake their silence for indifference, because indifference does not analyze, does not compare, does not wonder what could have been, and if they were truly done, they would not feel that subtle jealousy when they imagine someone else stepping into the space they once occupied. They would not feel that sudden nostalgia when an old memory appears. They would not feel that urge to check if you are still single, still available, still emotionally accessible, and yet they do, and that is why they are watching, because part of them is still holding on to possibility, still hoping the door is not fully closed, still believing that maybe timing was the problem, maybe circumstances were the issue. Maybe they just need the right moment to speak. But what they may not realize is that moments are created by courage, not by waiting. And while they wait, life continues moving, you continue evolving, and the version of you they once knew may not be the version that exists now, because growth changes standards, and when you grow, you no longer accept half-effort, no longer entertain mixed signals, no longer tolerate emotional confusion disguised as depth, and subconsciously they sense this shift, which makes them even more hesitant. Because now they know that if they come back, they cannot come back casually, they cannot come back with vague intentions, they cannot come back expecting you to carry the emotional weight, and that awareness intimidates them. So they linger in the shadows of your life, close enough to feel connected, far enough to avoid accountability, and the question is not whether they are watching, because their actions already reveal that they are. The real question is whether they will overcome their fear before the opportunity passes. And that is not something you can control, because you cannot force someone to be brave, you cannot convince someone to choose vulnerability, you cannot make someone ready before they decide they are, and your only responsibility is to remain aligned with your own worth, to continue building a life that feels fulfilling with or without their return, to protect your energy from becoming consumed by wondering when they will reach out, because when you start waiting again, you give your power back. And your power lies in detachment, in self-respect, in knowing that if someone truly values you, they will eventually risk the discomfort of a conversation rather than live with the regret of silence, and sometimes the fear of rejection is stronger than the pain of absence, but absence slowly teaches lessons that pride refuses to acknowledge, and one day they may realize that watching from a distance never replaced the connection they once had. That silent observation never healed the longing, that overthinking never brought clarity. And that the only way to find peace is to speak honestly, but whether that day comes soon or late, your path should not pause, because the right connection will never require you to shrink, to chase, or to beg for reassurance, and if someone is watching you yet afraid to reach out, it means they still see your value, they still feel your impact, they still recognize your presence as significant. But until they are ready to match that recognition with action, they remain on the outside looking in, and you must continue moving forward with the quiet confidence that the right people will never let fear silence what their heart truly wants to say, and while they continue to watch from a distance, what you may not realize is that their silence is not peaceful for them, it is heavy, because every time they see you moving forward without them it challenges the story they told themselves about why things ended or why they pulled away. And when someone convinces themselves that distancing was the right decision, they expect to feel relief, they expect clarity, they expect emotional freedom, but instead they feel curiosity that will not fade, attachment that will not dissolve, and a quiet anxiety every time your name appears on their screen, because deep down they are questioning whether they miscalculated your value, whether they assumed you would always circle back, whether they believed you would eventually break and reach out first, and now that you have not, now that you are standing firm in your silence, now that you are choosing dignity over desperation, the dynamic has reversed in a way they did not anticipate, and that reversal creates internal pressure, because they are no longer certain of their position in your life, they no longer feel guaranteed access to your attention, and uncertainty is uncomfortable for someone who once felt secure in your emotional availability, so they study you quietly. They look for clues in your behavior, they try to measure whether there is still space for them, they compare your current energy to the version of you they remember, and every sign of your growth becomes both attractive and intimidating at the same time, because growth increases value, and increased value raises the stakes, and higher stakes mean a greater fear of rejection if they attempt to return, so instead of risking that rejection, they create scenarios in their head, imagining different outcomes, rehearsing conversations that never happen, convincing themselves they just need more time, yet time is not the real issue, courage is, and courage requires them to confront their own pride, their own mistakes, their own emotional immaturity, and not everyone is ready to face that mirror, especially when it reflects accountability, because reaching out would mean admitting they still care, admitting they miss the connection, admitting that your absence affected them more than they expected. And vulnerability feels like surrender to someone who equates emotional honesty with weakness, so they stay silent, hoping circumstances will magically align, hoping you will give them a subtle invitation, hoping fate will remove the need for them to initiate, but life does not reward hesitation forever, and while they are hesitating, you are transforming, you are learning how to detach without becoming bitter, you are discovering how to love yourself without needing constant validation. You are building emotional strength that no longer depends on their acknowledgement, and that evolution is powerful, because when you stop needing someone to choose you, you become someone who is chosen differently, you radiate stability instead of anxiety, confidence instead of fear, and that shift alters the entire energetic balance between you, making them feel the gap more intensely, because now they sense that if they do not act, someone else eventually will. And the idea of losing you permanently is far more frightening than temporarily risking rejection. Yet fear has layers, and sometimes people must feel the possibility of permanent loss before they gather the bravery to step forward, and whether they do or not is ultimately a reflection of their growth, not yours, because your growth is already evident in your restraint, in your patience, in your refusal to chase someone who is capable of reaching out but chooses not to, and there is strength in that silence. There is dignity in allowing someone to experience life without your constant reassurance, because when someone truly values you, distance does not erase the connection, it clarifies it, and if they are watching you but afraid to reach out, it means they are still emotionally invested, still processing, still wrestling with pride and longing, and the longer they delay, the clearer your worth becomes in their mind, because absence has a way of amplifying significance. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all, because in that stillness you reveal that your life continues, your happiness expands, your identity strengthens, and anyone who wants to be part of it must approach with intention rather than hesitation, with honesty rather than confusion, and with courage rather than fear, because you are no longer available for half steps or silent observation, you are available for alignment, for clarity, for someone who does not just watch from the sidelines but walks beside you openly, and until they are ready to do that, their watching will remain exactly what it is now, a quiet confession of feelings they are not yet brave enough to speak, and as more time passes, something deeper begins to happen inside them that they rarely admit even to themselves, because watching you from afar slowly turns into self-reflection, and self-reflection can be uncomfortable when it exposes missed opportunities, immature reactions, or moments where ego was chosen over connection. And the more they observe your steady growth, your emotional stability, your ability to move without chaos, the more they are forced to confront the contrast between who they were when things fell apart and who you are becoming now, and that contrast can either inspire courage or increase insecurity, because when someone sees you thriving without them, it disrupts the illusion that you needed them more than they needed you, and that disruption shakes their pride at its core, especially if they believe distance would make you chase, beg, or break, but instead you recalibrated, you redirected your focus, you invested your energy into yourself, and now you glow differently, not loudly, not arrogantly, but confidently, and confidence without dependence is magnetic, it draws attention without effort, it commands respect without words, and that is exactly why they keep watching, because your silence is no longer empty, it is intentional. And intention feels powerful to someone who once underestimated your strength, so now they sit with questions they cannot ignore, wondering if they acted too quickly, if they misread your intentions, if they allowed fear or outside influences to distort something that had real potential, and regret does not arrive suddenly, it grows gradually in quiet moments when they realize that what they lost was not easily replaceable, that the connection they stepped away from was not ordinary, and that the peace they hoped to gain from distance never fully materialized. And yet even with these realizations, reaching out still feels risky, because too much time has passed, too many assumptions have formed, too many scenarios have been imagined where you no longer welcome them the same way, and fear of being ignored, rejected, or confronted with truth keeps their hands still, because silence protects them from immediate pain even if it prolongs long-term longing, and while they remain in that internal battle, you continue evolving into someone who no longer revolves around unresolved possibilities, someone who understands that love should feel secure, not confusing, someone who recognizes that consistency speaks louder than curiosity, and this is where the deeper shift happens, because when you truly detach emotionally, not in anger but in acceptance, your energy changes in a way they can sense even without direct contact, and that change unsettles them further, because now they feel the distance as real rather than temporary. They feel the absence as final rather than strategic, and when something begins to feel permanent, urgency awakens, but urgency and courage are not the same, and some people feel urgency yet still hesitate, trapped between wanting to act and fearing the outcome, and if they continue to hesitate, life will eventually decide for them, because opportunities do not remain open forever, and when someone watches too long without stepping forward, they risk becoming a spectator in a story they once had the chance to participate in. And the truth is that watching you is their way of staying emotionally connected without accountability. It allows them to feel close without committing, to stay informed without being vulnerable, to hold on to hope without risking pride, but that middle ground cannot sustain forever, because either they will gather the strength to communicate honestly or they will slowly realize that observation cannot replace experience, that imagination cannot substitute for real conversation, and that fear cannot build the connection they still secretly desire, and meanwhile you must remain grounded in the understanding that your value does not decrease because someone is afraid to approach it. Your worth is not diminished by their hesitation, and your future is not dependent on their timing, because the right person will never require endless watching before speaking. They will not let pride silence their intention, they will not gamble connection over ego, and until that level of clarity appears, your role is simply to continue forward with calm confidence, knowing that if someone is watching you but afraid to reach out, it is because your presence still matters, your growth still impacts them, and your absence still echoes louder than they expected, but whether they overcome that fear or remain in it is a choice only they can make, and you must never shrink your light to make it easier for someone to step out of the shadows, and in the end, the truth becomes very simple even if the emotions are not, because when someone is watching you but afraid to reach out, it means the connection still lives somewhere inside them, yet connection without courage cannot move forward, and no matter how many times they check your updates, replay old memories, or imagine future conversations, nothing changes until action replaces fear, and you cannot carry that responsibility for them. Because growth has already shifted you into a space where you understand that love should arrive with clarity, not confusion, with effort, not hesitation, and with bravery, not silent observation. So if they choose to remain a watcher, Let them watch while you continue building a life that does not pause for uncertainty, and if one day they finally gather the strength to speak honestly, you will meet that moment from a position of self-respect rather than longing, because you no longer chase what is capable of walking toward you, and you no longer shrink to make someone comfortable in their fear. And whether they step forward or stay silent, your path remains steady, your value remains undeniable, and the right connection will never be afraid to reach for you openly.